Imagine you're cruising 33,000 feet above the Atlantic. Everything is calm, routine. Suddenly the plane plunges and you're weightless. This was the horrifying reality for the passengers of EgyptAir Flight 990. Just 30 minutes after departing New York for Cairo, the plane disappeared into the depths of the ocean,
EgyptAir 990 New York Center.
claiming 217 lives. Families shattered, the world left in disbelief, and pressing questions remain unanswered. What truly happened to EgyptAir Flight 990? This evening, we delve deep into the incident, examine controversial theories, and reveal personal stories hidden beneath the Atlantic. Join us as we dissect the evidence, challenge accepted explanations, and strive to unveil the truth behind one of aviation's most enigmatic disasters. John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York's largest gateway to the world, manages a staggering flow of air traffic. In 1999, nearly 32 million passengers and over 340,000 aircraft movements ranked JFK among the busiest airports globally. Its significant role in international travel cannot be overstated. On board EgyptAir Flight 990, the flight deck was crewed by seasoned and relief pilots, crucial for the long journey to Cairo. Leading the flight was Captain Ahmed Al-Habashi, with 36 years of flying experience. His co-pilot, Adel Anwar, had rescheduled his flight duties around his wedding, a personal glimpse into the lives behind the cockpit doors. Several hours into the flight, relief pilots Captain Rauf Noureldan and First Officer Gamil El-Batouti were to take over. This change allowed the initial crew to rest, maintaining their focus for the critical phases of flying. The aircraft also carried a team of 14 cabin crew members, trained to ensure passenger safety and comfort during the transatlantic crossing. Among the 217 passengers was a diverse group, including 33 Egyptian military officers. Their presence highlighted the ongoing defense training collaborations between Egypt and the US. The flight was also significant for many American seniors excited to explore Egypt's ancient sites. These travelers, often participants in programs like Elder Hostel, looked forward to a journey of discovery and learning. 20 minutes after takeoff, as EgyptAir Flight 990 was smoothly cruising at altitude, an unexpected shift occurred in the cockpit dynamics. Gamil Al-Batouti, the relief first officer and a former Egyptian Air Force instructor, entered the cockpit to take over the controls earlier than planned. Despite his seniority, Al-Batouti's approach to take control seemed out of the ordinary. The recorded conversation reveals a mix of casual banter and a surprising insistence to assume the helm. The younger first officer, Adel Anwar, seemed taken aback by Al-Batouti's early replacement request. The dialogue captured by the cockpit voice recorder illustrates the tension. Shortly after this exchange, Captain Ahmed Al-Habashi excused himself to use the restroom, leaving Al-Batouti alone at the controls. It was during this moment of solitude that the aircraft began a sudden and unexplained descent. Just 16 seconds into the dive, the plane sharply pitched downward, creating a zero-gravity experience throughout the cabin. Alarms blared as the aircraft plunged. Captain Al-Habashi, disoriented by the sudden shift, raced back to the cockpit. He urgently demanded an explanation from Al-Batouti. By 1:52 a.m., with Captain Al-Habashi back at the controls attempting to arrest the dive, EgyptAir Flight 990 disappeared from radar. The aircraft, now beyond critical recovery maneuvers, hurtled towards the Atlantic Ocean. The events that transpired in those final moments are still heavily debated.
EgyptAir 990 New York Center.
My dad and Ginny were married in 1998 on October 23rd. And to celebrate their first anniversary, they decided to take a trip to Egypt.
They had been particularly fond of a program known as Elder Hostel, and this particular vacation trip to visit the pyramids and the other Historical sites in Egypt was an elder hostel trip.
Using recovered voice recordings, wreckage analysis, and testimonies, the story of what should have been a routine flight emerges as one of the most perplexing and heart-rending disasters in aviation history. As the sun rose over the Atlantic, search teams were already looking for signs of EgyptAir Flight 990.
16 seconds after the dive began, when the airplane had gone into zero G and into negative G and was at an extreme angle, the captain somehow made his way back into the cockpit. How he did that physically, I will never know.
The first tragic clue came quickly when a ship found floating pieces of the plane. This confirmed everyone's worst fears. The investigation into the crash started with disagreements between the Egyptian and American teams. They couldn't agree on why the plane crashed. Was it a mechanical problem, or did someone cause it on purpose? The American team was confused by strange patterns in the flight data, thinking someone might have caused the crash. The Egyptian team believed it was a mechanical error. We were puzzled by the data from the flight recorders. We had to figure out if these odd patterns were because of a mechanical issue or if someone did something on purpose. This disagreement led to tension, not just between the teams, but also between the countries they represented.
I was shocked. It's a big tragedy for us. And I give my condolences to all the passengers, to the families of the crews who have been lost in this tragedy. And I have contact with President Clinton and other embassies. And he's giving good support for trying to find, investigate, see what was the reason.
I spoke earlier with President Mubarak of Egypt today to express my condolences and to assure him that we would be working together closely until this matter is resolved. We do not know what caused this tragedy.
Both sides argued strongly for their own views, examining every piece of evidence, from radar data to the last sounds recorded in the cockpit.
What's happening?
The plane's sudden drops and climbs are not normal. This argument, whether it was a deliberate act or a failure, shows how complicated it is to investigate plane crashes. As more pieces of the plane were pulled from the sea, the arguments heated up. What made the pilots act the way they did? Were they dealing with a failing plane, or was there another reason? Every new piece of debris added more questions. As the investigation went on, families waiting for answers, and people around the world watched closely.
Can you imagine if you have a beloved one, a father, a daughter, or a brother, facing all the horrors of finding himself falling from 36,000 feet suddenly, trying to save his life, his colleagues' lives, the people, the passengers.
I was talking to myself, trying to convince myself that my father was not on this plane, and if he's on this plane, he will be safe, because my father was an Air Force pilot. He had a very good experience. And I thought maybe if the plane crashed, he will be able to, to be in a safe place and to swim and to go to any land.
The investigation into EgyptAir Flight 990 showed how complicated it can be when technical problems and human actions mix in a tragic event. In the investigation of the crash of EgyptAir Flight 990, the last words spoken by First Officer Al-Batouti in the cockpit caught everyone's attention. He repeated, "I rely on God, I rely on God," several times.
What's happening?
These words became a key piece of evidence. The US investigators thought these words might mean that Al-Batouti did something on purpose to cause the plane to crash. They saw his actions on the flight controls as deliberate, but the Egyptian team disagreed. They said, "I rely on God" is a common phrase that doesn't mean someone is planning to do harm. They believed the crash was caused by a problem with the plane's controls, not by the pilot's actions. This disagreement led to two very different conclusions. The US report said the crash might have been intentional by the first officer. The Egyptian report insisted it was an accident due to mechanical failure. So, what really happened on EgyptAir Flight 990? The final words from the cockpit and the evidence have led to much debate. Personally, I think it was intentional by First Officer Al-Batouti. But what do you think? This tragic event reminds us of the challenges in solving aviation mysteries. It shows us how important it is to carefully analyze every clue and consider different perspectives.